Welcome to Delight Podcast Season 2. We are back! I'm Leah. I'm Leah Sachs, and this is Adam Curtis.
Hey, and it is absolutely incredible that we are back for season 2 because we were just not expecting this. We thought Delight Podcast, this would just be a one season thing. Me, Leah, interviewing a few of our friends. We'll have a bit of a laugh. We'll put it out there. And then people actually started listening.
I know. Actually started listening, sharing, responding. And then we were like, oh, maybe we should continue with this. So we prayed about it, chatted to some wise people about it. And now we have a whole little season 2 for you. And we are so excited to share it with you. We have some amazing guests, such wisdom, and I can't wait.
And the first one of our absolutely stellar, top quality, amazing guests is Ben Slee.
Ben Slee is music pastor at Christ Church Mayfair and a songwriter. He's husband to Sarah and dad to Abby and Elijah, and also happens to be a very good friend of mine. He is going to be chatting to us today about singing. So today on Delight Podcast, we have Ben Slee as our guest. And perhaps it goes without saying that I'm very excited about today's topic, singing, and it's very close to my heart. And as such, we have invited, frankly, one of my closest friends to be our guest today. Ben, welcome to Delight Podcast.
Well, thank you. You are very close to my heart as well. So I'm glad to be here. I'm you too, Adam, but mainly Leah, sorry.
No, say how it is. Put me down.
No, not put you down at all. It's lovely. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this. This is going to be great.
I'm excited. I'm excited about having you on the podcast for ages. But before we get to our topic of singing, Ben, would you tell us a little bit about how you came to faith?
I have the privilege of having wonderful Christian mum and dad. And I remember when I was about 4 years old, I was feeling really guilty for something I'd done at school. And I remember my mum sitting on my bed with me. I actually visibly remember this. I think it's something that the Lord preserves in our minds, some of these precious stories. I remember her telling me, Jesus can take your guilt away. I remember her saying that, and I remember her praying with me. And so I think I became a Christian then. I think I've trusted in Jesus then. It's sometimes hard to pinpoint a point when you grow up in a Christian home. But that for me was a really significant moment. And since then, I think through all sorts of different joys and difficult things as well, God has kept me and been faithful and grown me. Another significant time for me was when I was about 15. We went to a sort of youth meeting at lots of churches together in the area, had a youth meeting, and just really struck to take this faith on, for myself in an even deeper way. I remember the illustration of the talk was something like, into our sort of humanness, we've had this downloaded onto our hard drive, if you like. We've had this thing called sin, and it's turned us away from God and each other, and now Jesus has come and wiped us clean, and it just sort of something clicked there for me that really made me want to take my faith even more seriously and really, really pursue following Jesus.
And when you talk about that meeting that really kind of encouraged you to take things forward, were there any changes? What did taking your faith forward look like?
I think it meant at school, I want people to know Jesus. I want to live as someone who is different, and I think I want to be okay with that, because actually, I want to point other people to Him. And
do you feel like you were able to do that in school?
This is the amazing thing about our school. We had a Christian union, which is set up by youth leaders in the area and things, and sort of run in house by the students. As you might imagine, I was doing quite a lot of music things.
No way!
I know, right? Shocking.
You were a trombone player back in the day, right?
I was, and I was in the choir as well. And it just happened, this was all about the time that my voice was breaking. And I thought, okay, I think I'm going to take a break from the choir while that sorts itself out. And I went and made sure I was part of the CU each week. Then sort of over time, sort of became more involved, and ended up kind of having a role in leading that and teaching the Bible to other students and things. And then I picked up a guitar around that time and started leading music in our youth group, which, to be honest with you, was awful the first time I did it. There's actually still photos of that, which I hope.
Ben, why was it awful?
Well, I didn't know what I was doing, I think, for a start. Everyone was very kind, and my youth leader particularly was very encouraging, and for some reason let me do it again. But I'm sure that it was less than helpful in lots of ways. I look back now, but in God's kindness, He wasn't finished with me. And that was a good thing. And my youth leader who was musical himself, was very encouraging and helpful, and kind of shaped me and mentored me and taught me, as have a few others since then. And yes, I think I'm slightly better now, hopefully more useful than I was.
Amazing. You said God wasn't finished with you. So what did he do next?
Well, so I ended up, so I was leading in the youth group, leading music there, started leading a church services as well. About that time, I actually ended up taking over leadership of the youth group. I was probably about 19. That sounds a
Okay.
lot worse than it was. They were a bit younger than me, most of them. But so I started a teacher of the Bible, and just after that, I became an apprentice at our church. This is all home church in
Hmm.
South East London. Spent 2 years learning how to teach people the Bible, keeping doing ministry things. And after that, which is where I met my wife, Sarah. We were
Fabulous,
interns
Sarah.
together. Yeah, fabulous, Sarah. Absolutely. We got married at the end of those 2 years, and we moved to Christchurch
Hmm.
Mayfair, which is where I have got to know the wonderful Leah, and where I've been the music pastor for 7 years, which, if you can
Wow.
believe that.
Ben, has it all been plain sailing?
No, it hasn't. No, it definitely hasn't. In a kind of normal Christian life sense, like in many ways, I feel really blessed to, I don't think in many ways I've really had lots of hard things to sort of bear for Jesus in lots of ways. But the normal Christian things, doubts, fears about various things, yeah, some tricky moments, training to be a
Mm,
minister and learning lots of things and getting lots of things wrong, and so all those kind of normal, really normal, which feel quite big deal at the time, kind of
yeah.
things where oh, am I a Christian? Those kinds
Mm,
of worries and things. And I think the decisive thing for me has been people really just being patient with me, loving me, and
okay.
pointing me to Jesus in the Bible. Like, it's sort again, it's not something hugely dramatic in one sense, but people just being with me, loving me, and over time, my confidence in Jesus has really grown. I remember when I first started as an intern,
Yeah.
I was looking at some sort of theology things for the first time. I guess I'd grown up in church and heard lots of the words and things, but I'd never really kind of grappled with things deeply before. And we
Yeah.
got to the point where we were talking about how God chooses us rather than, in one sense, we choose God. And do you know what? I spent about a month absolutely terrified because I think the basis of my confidence has always been, well, I've chosen God, haven't I? Which in
Okay.
one sense is kind of true, isn't it? Like we
Yeah.
do make a choice to follow Jesus, but in an ultimate sense, actually, that was God's work in me,
Mm,
enabling me to do that. And so I was thinking, gosh, well, if you look at my life, I'm not perfect. If I look at the fruit of my life, how do I know that I'm really a Christian? Oh my goodness. And it was over that course that month where I was slowly loved and shown the Bible and shown Jesus more that I realized, but that's a wonderful thing that God's got me. And it's always presented like that in the Bible, isn't it? It's never a thing to cause us fear that God has chosen us rather than we've chosen him in the most profound sense. It's always there to comfort us and say, God has got you. There is nothing
yeah.
going to take you away from him. So even as a normal Christian, but also as a minister in one sense, we've all had our ups and downs, and God has used lots of different people to point me to Jesus and give me confidence in him above myself, really, I think.
And in that transition to kind of, doing music at school and then it kind of becoming your job, your role, pastoring
Mm.
people with and through and by music, can you tell us one or two things that God has really taught you in that role and how that has interwoven with your kind of personal relationship with Christ?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've realized as I've gone on that it depends a lot less upon me than I thought it did. I suppose God's got bigger in my thinking. I've got smaller in some ways, which is probably a good direction for things to go, isn't it?
Yes, bro.
Given that is in fact true. I guess I mean by that we can focus so much, and probably in a bit when we talk about singing, we're going to focus quite a lot on the stuff that we do.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on how can we do this well, and what's the purpose of it and all that sort of thing, and that's good. We should think about that. But I think more and more has been impressed on me is the ultimate reality lies with God. Like God calls his people together. God calls his people to himself, and
Yeah.
he's amazing because he uses people like me to do good to his people, hopefully. But it doesn't depend on me, and sometimes God works in spite of us.
Yeah.
So I think one sort of journey I've been on in that sense is actually no, God has got this. He's the one who cares for his people more than I could ever care for his people. At the end of the day, it's down to him, and as much as it's important that I do everything I can possibly do to serve him, honor him, and serve his people and love them well.
Mm.
They're his people, and he'll have his way and bless them the way that he wants to.
We'd love for you to check out our website at delightpodcast.com. There you can find transcripts of each episode, more detailed show notes, and a blog on singing, which actually this week is written by me. We'd love for you to rate, subscribe, and share, and if you wish, review Delight Podcast. It makes a big difference and helps others find us more easily. You can, of course, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just search Delight Podcast. Now back over to Adam as he chats to Ben about singing.
It could be said that like churches are the kings of emotional manipulation. Like often they're very impressive buildings. It could be a huge organ and a robed choir, or a very modern sort of band and nice lighting. And then you'll get a charismatic speaker on stage, and there's tears in people's eyes and they're giving their lives to Jesus. Like, isn't singing just like emotional manipulation? Is that all it is? What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It shouldn't be, is what I would say to that. Thinking about manipulation, essentially that is having a control or influence over someone in a dishonest way, or you're altering the way that things are presented to mislead people. And I guess in the context of church, you're causing people to feel something that they can't maybe later explain, and so that get to the end of the meeting and it's like, that was amazing, that was great. Okay, what was great? I don't know. It was just really great. Can be a sign of this, right? And actually, I actually love this question, despite its appearance as an aggressive question. It isn't really, because actually, what I love about this question is that it means that we can get into what music is about, why we do this, right? So, and it gets to the heart of that. So the goal that we see in the Bible, there's more to say than this, but one of the places I go to a lot with people is Colossians 3:16, that we want the message of Christ to dwell in us richly as we sing. Mm-hmm. There's sort of two parts to that, right? So you've got the message. I mean, that's the gospel, right? So that's the story about Jesus. That Jesus is the glorious God that we have turned away from. Instead of just punishing us like we deserve, he comes and he lives the perfect life that we could never live. He dies in our place. He adopts us as God's children. And then he rose again in victory, and he's going to come again to bring us to enjoy God forever. That's the gospel in a nutshell. That's the message of Christ. And what we're told to do in this verse is to let that dwell richly in us as we sing. So yes, that is our minds, but it's more than that. It's our body and our soul. It's our whole being. We want that to sort of resonate with this gospel. And music's really able to help us with that. So, I mean, I think we get this. It helps us remember words, doesn't it? Often words we don't want to remember, if we're honest, but also some that we do. And music can really help us with that. I mean, even to the point where we might not always remember, okay, what were the 3 points from the sermon last Sunday? I mean, have a think now. If you were at church on Sunday, can you remember? I mean, you might have preached them, Adam, so it might be different in your case. I don't know, maybe it isn't. Let's not go there.
And I've still forgotten.
Yeah, there you go. But you might remember the song you sang, or one of the songs you sang. In that sense, it's really helpful to helping us remember things. But more than that, as well as engaging our minds, actually music helps us to, I love the phrase, it helps us to feel the truth. Helps us to feel the truth. By that, I guess I mean, we respond to what we've heard from the Bible with God-honouring emotions, like that respond to the truth of the gospel in a right way. And actually singing helps us cultivate those emotions as well. So it actually shapes us as we sing. So I would say music can be used in a manipulative way. Let's avoid that. But I'm saying it shouldn't be manipulation if it's rooted in the gospel of Jesus. And actually all of our musical creativity and choices are there to serve that goal. The goal is to just show people Christ. In fact, when Paul's talking about his ministry, not about music specifically, but generally about the kind of showing people Christ this is in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. He actually says to them, we have renounced secret and shameful ways. We don't use deception or distort the word of God. And why does he do that? Well, because his ministry is all about showing people Jesus. That should be our goal. Those of us who lead music, or when we're in church and we're singing together, we're all part of this together. The goal is not per se an emotional experience or to manipulate people or whip people up or anything like that. The goal is to behold Jesus, and music helps us do that in a really powerful, unique way that gets real deep into us and shapes us for God's glory.
Oh, okay. Can we push into something you've just said there? So we talked about how music helps us feel the truth and music shapes us. Why does music shape us? How does music shape us?
Because of that nature of getting deeply into our hearts and minds, music grabs us in a way that often things don't actually. It drives it even more deeply into us. It kind of grips our souls, really. I think that's what it's getting at with that dwell richly phrase, really, in that verse in Colossians. When we've got music coupled to the truth, that can be hugely powerful. This is why it really matters what we sing, right? Because we want it to be pointing to Jesus. We want it to be the truth about Jesus. It's got to be the word, the message about Christ that's dwelling in us. But so long as that is true, what it's doing is taking that incredibly powerful spirit authored truth and it's driving it right into the center of who we are. So in that sense, we're not changed by music per se, but we're changed by the power of the Holy Spirit working through the word of God as it gets right down deep into us through the gift of God's grace that is music.
And I love that you say it's a gift of God's grace, because music is a gift, isn't it?
It is.
We have a whole book. Sorry, I'm totally butting in, but I'm so excited by what you're encouraging us with, Ben. We have got a whole book of songs in the Bible. I mean, there's a reason God gave us music. And I love that the Old Testament, people respond to great acts of God through music and song. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now, Adam, and let you ask the next question. But I'm just excited.
That's great. And just to pick up on something there, Leah, if I can, if you look through all of the Bible, what's the kind of default response whenever God does something incredible in redemptive history, like the Exodus, and he parts the waters and they all walk through, things like that? You always see what's the response of God's people, what's their go-to response. It's singing with joy. And you see that all the way through into the New Testament. There's some hidden hymns in there. So Philippians 2 is a good example. That's probably a song that they sang about Jesus in response to the cross and resurrection. So absolutely, that's it's always been the default response of God's people. Seeing a fresh expression of God's grace leads us to fresh expressions of his praise.
I don't have a question on the back of that, but I just love that statement.
It's pretty cool, isn't it? I mean, that's like hardly that's just right there in the Bible. That's not a word for word quote of a verse, but you just see it again and again, and it's amazing is that you go through the Bible and just see that. That's what I guess we get that in the Psalms and in Revelation. You get this thing about we're going to sing a new song to the Lord. Well, why do we really need any more new songs? Well, yeah, because when we see more of God's grace, it just demands it from us, that it makes us want to sing.
Can you say that, Ben? Like, okay, we see God's grace and it makes us want to sing. Like, some people might like shoot back as like, well, that's because you're a good singer. You were in the choir as a boy. You're fine. Your voice is lovely. What about for that person who's like, I hear myself sing and I sound like a cat being strangled? Right? What would you say to that person who's like, oh, I'm just a terrible singer? Do I really have to do this?
Well, my short and less helpful answer is, well, yeah, you do have to do it because it says so in the Bible. That's really, really unhelpful. As you get like Psalm 47:6, sing praises to our God, sing praises to our King, sing praises. So it's hard to get out of it then, isn't it? Anyway, that's the not so helpful answer. Here's the more helpful answer. Look at what happens when you sing. Just look at what happens. Here's a few examples, right? So back to that verse in Colossians. When you sing, God's word dwells in you richly. And actually, not just you, because the point of that verse there is that you sing to one another and to God. There's both directions there going on. So actually, God's word dwells in other people richly as well when you sing. That's a pretty powerful thing, isn't it? Leah will have heard me say this a lot. This is something I go to with our music team a lot because it's amazing.
And we're very thankful you go to it.
Well, good. You know where I'm going already.
Yeah, I do.
2 Corinthians 3, the end of that chapter, Paul's talking about his ministry. And again, it's not about music specifically, but this definitely applies. So he says, we all behold the Lord's glory and we're being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. Now, and he goes on to say later, where do we see this glory? He says it's in the face of Jesus Christ. Now, what that's saying there is, as we behold Jesus, which is what we're doing when we're singing, the Spirit is powerfully at work to transform us to be more like Jesus. That's what that verse is saying. So as we sing to one another, that's what God is at work doing. And so this is what I say to the music team. I say, just grasp the significance of that just for a moment. So you're on the music team this Sunday, and it's all the normal things, and you get there early and you're trying to set up and the cables don't work and all that sort of thing. Very typical experience, very ordinary. But here's the spiritual dimension behind that. Imagine this: one day when we get to heaven, someone you might not even know walks up to you. They were there this Sunday when you were on music, and they say to you, I walked into church that day, I was ready to give up on Jesus. I just like, I can't do this anymore. The way you led that song pointed me to Jesus. The way that you pointed to Jesus, the Spirit used that and ministered to me, and he kept me going, and now I'm here, and we're in heaven together forever. Like, that's the kind of eternal significance that we can see in this. It's a really powerful thing. And that's true of you if you're in the congregation and you think, how did you put it? Your voice is like a cat being ironed or something. That's worse than
Being
strangled, isn't it?
It is worse.
Well, even if it is that bad. And actually, do you know what? Here's another one for you. People can be brought to know Jesus for the first time. So, in 1 Corinthians 14, Paul's talking there about the gathering of the church, and he says, when you'll come together and you prophesy, which I would take to mean speaking about Jesus, saying the truth about Jesus, this unbeliever comes in and falls down and says, God is truly among you, and they become a Christian like that on the spot. And you think, wow, do we believe that could happen when we sing? As church, that's what we're doing. We're speaking the truth about Jesus together. We're singing the truth about Jesus together. What I'd want to say to someone is who doesn't feel they've got a brilliant voice, well, does that excite you? You and others become more like Jesus. His word dwells in you, and people can even become Christians. And actually, do you notice not one of those is about quality of your voice, right? So Jesus is far more concerned that your heart is in tune with him than how good a vocalist you are. And I often say to our musicians, it's not the X factor. I've checked. There's no buttons underneath the chairs. There are no big red X's above the stage. You're not here to perform. You're here to lead people in an authentic response of worship to who he is. I want to say to them, look, doesn't that make you want to sing? Doesn't the gospel make you want to sing? And seeing how God uses that and works through you to serve his people and build you all up together, that's an amazing thing. Even if, you don't have the best voice in the world, you can still do an amazing work. God will do amazing work through you as you sing together with God's family.
Oh, that's quite an encouragement there to know that you might have a voice with a cat being ironed and the Lord can still use it for his glory.
Yeah, no animals were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Ben, you've given us an incredibly beautiful and high sort of vision of music and of singing. Like, just picking up some of your phrases, like through it, people come to know Jesus. As we sing, we're beholding Jesus, we're being transformed into him. Are there such things as good songs and bad songs? Are there songs which are going to be more helpful in transforming us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The question is, how do you think about which are good and which are bad? Come back to the goal again that we see in Scripture. It's let the word of Christ dwell in us richly. Mm-hmm. So I think there can be all sorts of different kinds of good and bad songs. I think if there's a song that tells you the truth about Jesus, that's probably good. If it tells you something that's not true about Jesus, that's not going to be good. Because do you remember we've said the power of music to drive these truths into us? You don't want to be driving rubbish into you. Mm-hmm. That could be really damaging. Someone, I think it's a theologian called Gordon Fee, has said, show me a church's songs and I'll show you their theology. And his point there is what you sing actually shapes what you believe. And so you've got to make sure that it's true and it's about this message about Jesus and what he's done and who he is. So I guess a bad song could be a song that tells you something that's not true about Jesus or isn't very clear about what Jesus has done. But also there's the other element of dwelling in you richly. And if it's just insanely complicated and it goes up, down, around the houses, all over the place and uses confusing words that you don't understand, yeah, that's probably not going to help you a whole lot either. Because if you can't remember it, even as a total non-musician, if you've sung it a few times and go, I have no idea how this song goes, maybe it's not doing its job and getting the gospel into you richly. I guess the best songs, they fit like an old slipper. Like, it just feels like you've been here before, but not in a kind of familiar, it's really trite, every song sounds the same kind of way, but in a kind of, this is fresh, but it feels intuitive. I think it's probably the word I'd use, and I can I can sort of go with the grain of it. That's a sort of big picture view. But yes, there's definitely songs that will be more encouraging and build us up if they're telling us about the truth about Jesus. And does it make you want to sing about Jesus? I think is the other question there, isn't it? And does it help you to do that? So there's definitely good and bad songs out there.
And Benji, you're a songwriter. When you're writing your own music, just as a small aside, so I've interrupted you again, Adam, are there specific biblical goals and musical goals you have when you're writing your own stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good question. On the sort of biggest level, I've always wanted to come down to I want this to be true about Jesus. I want it to be a fresh expression of that. I don't want to just say something that someone else has already said. I want to help the church to sing. I want people of all musical abilities or none to be able to engage with this and sing it and sort of get this truth really sort of pumping in their hearts and their minds as well. those are the sorts of things that I'm hoping to see, and I want it to be memorable. I want people to be able to go, oh yeah, I remember that song. I want it to be creative and fresh in a way that takes us deeper into the ancient truths of the Bible, that helps us to go deeper into what God has already revealed. So I'm not making new stuff up, but I'm helping people see it in a fresh way. The best songs and hymns all like through the history of the church have done that. Yeah, hopefully trying to be part of that.
So we've seen about the real importance of song choice and how it is important to sing the word, the truth, the gospel in praise, in response to the Lord and to our church fam. I mean, frequently what I hear is, oh, the band were really good. Oh my goodness, that drummer was terrible. Or what was going on about that singer? Are there things that make a good or bad kind of band, AV team, whatever you'd like to call it?
Yes. So this is the thing, and we sort of touched on this at the beginning. Ultimately, this is God's work, and He works through us. But there are things we can do to be more helpful or less helpful. That is definitely the case, because He works through means and He uses us. However big your team is, it might just be you in your church. You might have a few people on your team. We want to come back to that goal of what is it that we're trying to do? What in the Bible helps us see that? If I were to have sort of advice for musicians and music teams, I think I'd want to start by saying, okay, well, first of all, be humbled and amazed by how significant this ministry can be. And we've talked a bit about that already. We get to be a part of this. That's amazing. Like, that means we need to take it seriously. We need to think these things through. It really matters what we do. But also realize how dependent we are. We can't do anything without the Holy Spirit. Like, our music can't change people in a kind of moral way. We can't see people saved through our music, or strengthened, or people who are suffering finding hope in Jesus. That's through the gospel, and then that's the Spirit's work. But amazingly, at the same time, He uses us through the means of grace that is singing in together in church to do that. So I think I want to say to you, first of all, just recognize how amazing it is that we get to be part of this significant thing, but also be really humbled by that. I think I'd say as well, like, we want to let the lens of everything we do come down to that basic principle of, okay, how do I get this word into these people? So I think sometimes there's a temptation to kind of look at stuff on YouTube or like recordings on Spotify and things and kind of imitate them. And actually, I don't think that's the most helpful thing, because what about your people? It comes down to, this is ministry. We need to know the people who we're serving, who we're leading. Lots of them will be non-musicians. We need to think about what's going to serve them, like what kind of instruments, how you use your instrument, those sorts of things. What's going to really build up these people right in front of me right here. And that kind of leads on to another thing, which is just understanding what our role is. I think the thing I'd most want to emphasize to music teams and music leaders is we're there for clear leadership. That's the big thing. So quality is important. So quality is a part of this, but there's a purpose to it. So Bob Coughlin, who's from Sovereign Grace Music, I've often heard him say, we want to be the best musicians we can be for the sake of the church. We want to help lead them into singing. Or John Piper's got a phrase, undistracting excellence, which is one of our sort of real core values at the church where Leah and I serve. And what he means by that is, we don't want to distract people from the substance of who Jesus is, either by shoddy ministry, as in it's so bad, like it's so out of tune, it's so loud or quiet, that we're just thinking about that. That's not undistracting excellence. But we don't want it to be have excessive finesse, where everyone's doing all these like massive runs and everyone's going, wow, the music is incredible. I don't want to be too harsh to people who say that. They're just trying to be encouraging, right? But we don't want that to be the sort of overwhelming essence of everything we do, is the music sounds great, because we want it to be undistracting excellence. We want to point to Jesus with everything we do. I want to say to any music teams or musicians who are listening, the goal is get your congregation singing. That's what we're about, because that's how that truth is dwelling in people. And that means some really practical things. If I may get ever so slightly technical for one moment, we want
Please
the
do,
range
Ben.
of a congregation. I thought you'd be up for it. Adam, you can tell me if this makes no sense. But for musicians, like, think about the congregation's range. I think we've all experienced it, even if we're non-musicians, because sometimes it's too low and the blokes can't sing because it's down here, and then quite often it's too high and the ladies are like, I'm just can't get there.
Yep.
But if we're sitting between kind of an A below middle C up to a D, that's a pretty safe range. We want to be doing things like leading people in clearly, like making eye contact with people. Yes, I know they can be a bit weird sometimes, but just look at them and engage them and bring them into the songs. It just serves them so that they're thinking about not, oh, where do I start coming in here? We're thinking about how great Jesus is in the song. And as well, another thing, we want to lead people emotionally, if I can put it that way. Like we each have our own temperament. It's going to look really different. But what does it look like for you to model a kind of authentic response to the gospel? We don't want to communicate that the gospel's dull or uninteresting or isn't as powerful as we claim it is in the words we sing, because we look utterly bored when we're singing the words. Be humbled and amazed by what we get to do. Make everything about how to get the word to dwell in the people that you're leading. And then just think about some really simple leadership practices that will help you to lead people. You don't have to be the best musician in the world. You don't have to know all the chords and play all the things. But in fact, sometimes it's better to do things simply for the sake of being able to lead people in clearly and help them feel secure so that they can just soar and go off and sing. I think as far as a music team is kind of in accord with those principles, and that can be the difference between a good team that's there to serve or maybe a team that loves its own sound and isn't really too worried about people singing. That's a real shame from what we see in the Bible. Actually, the emphasis is there on the most important instrument, I suppose, is the congregation. There's some thoughts from musicians, if they're only listening. If they're not, they're slightly pointless, but there we go. I'm sure if you have any musicians in your church, maybe they should listen to that bit.
Oh, no, I hope there are musicians listening, because that's just so helpful. So changing our focus a little bit onto that regular congregation sort of member. We've heard a real strong vision about the importance of singing on a Sunday. Singing thus it feels too important just to be a Sunday activity. How do we push singing into the rest of the week? Or does it not have a place there?
Oh, no, I think it absolutely does. There's a few ways that we can do that. Some churches do still print service sheets and stuff. We do, because this actually, part of the reason is we would love people to take them home with you and sing it through. There's a few that do that at our church. If you're really not sure where to find good resource on that, I'm sure ask your church leaders. I'm sure they'll be able to point you to some of the songs that you sing as a church. Gather the family around, or the flatmates around, or the friends or your home group, and sing through these. It's just something we do as a little family devotional time. So Sarah and I have two kids, with Abby, who's nearly 3, and Elijah, who's nearly 1. We have our little devotional times at the end of each day. And I say, Abby, because she's the only one who's old enough to understand what I'm saying. Abby, what song would you
Sarah's
like
old
to sing?
enough to understand as well.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah. Yes, to be really clear. Sarah's.
You're one.
I just yes. That's a good point. Yes, Sarah too understands. Yes. Anyway, I'll say, Abby, which song would you like to sing to Jesus tonight? And we've got a little group of about 10 or so songs that she can get a bit of, chorus or something, and she chooses the song, and we sing it together. And then we also have something called her night hymn, which is an old hymn which my parents used to sing to me, which is called Jesus Tender Shepherd, Hear Me. And we sing that every night as we put her to bed. So just little things like that. I mean, as well as, having good Christian music, and by good I mean all the stuff we've already said, playing in the home or whatever on your running playlist.
I feel like there might be someone listening to this who are like, oh, I'd love to teach 10 songs to my little ones. I'd love to know 10 songs. But in reality, I go into church and I don't know any of this music. This is all just so new to me. What sort of advice would you give to that person?
I think the first thing is just what to do in the moment. Like, you're in church and you don't know the song, what do you do? But then there's also the kind of, okay, how do I grow in learning songs? When we're in church, it can still do us great good. And so I would encourage people to look, if you don't know how the tune goes, you don't know if it goes up or down or sideways or whatever, I think we can still take those opportunities to pray and thank God for the truth that we see there, and just kind of have a look at the words and like think about them and focus on them and go, wow, this is amazing. And hopefully, again, if they're good words about Jesus, that they'll point us to him and go, wow, this is amazing. This is true and wonderful. And just kind of absorb the sound of all your brothers and sisters around you singing their hearts out to Jesus. And, have a little look around the room, and you'll see people and you'll know their lives, and you'll know the good things they go through and the hard things they go through. And actually seeing them singing away is profound encouragement. It really is. In fact, some of the most precious times of singing I can think of have been with people who've really suffered and struggled, but they want to praise Jesus and worship him with great joy. And actually that ministers to me so much, because it's such an encouragement. So even if we don't actually know where the song goes, that can be a helpful thing in the moment, just to pray through those words and just kind of absorb and be encouraged by those around us. And all the while, I guess we want to learn how they do go. And I guess, again, taking the service sheets home and asking your church leaders, hey, where can I get my hands on some versions of songs that we do? I think the big thing I'd say as well is, don't worry, you'll get there. Music, as we've said, has this nature of getting in us, and over time you will get them.
Okay, thinking about someone else who might be listening in to this and be like, Ben, I love singing. In fact, I think it's amazing. But when I go to church, I just don't like the music there.
Hmm.
And I just find it quite a painful experience. Any words of wisdom for that person?
Yeah, that's a hard place to be, isn't it? I guess firstly, we're part of a church family. One of the guys who I'm greatly indebted to and trained me used to have the picture that church services are a bit like Christmas dinner. In that, when you have Christmas dinner, you're together for the sake of being a family. And no one has their ideal meal. No, some people would rather just sit in front of the telly, and some people would, rather have burger and chips or whatever. But for the sake of being together, we come together. And church is a bit like that in that no one has quite their ideal situation. They're all things we'd like to do differently and change, but we come together to be together as a family. So I guess that's more sort of helps us in our kind of disposition of heart as we go on a Sunday praying, Lord, you know how I'm struggling with music right now at church. Help me to love my brothers and sisters. I guess I would say participate in the singing with great joy, because actually these truths are still true when the musical wheels come off and it's all a bit rubbish, musically speaking. If we're singing truth about Jesus, Jesus is still that good. We want our response, the way we engage in singing, not to be determined by the means ultimately, but by the Saviour who brought us together. That's hard. That's not an easy
Yeah.
thing to do. That's not to negate anything we've just said about working really hard to do it well. And it might be that someone listening to this is a total non-musician. It might be that they're quite musical. I guess I'd want to say, if you're musical, get in there and serve. Like, see if you can come alongside and help. And I'm sure there's lots of training and resources that we can point people to.
We will in the show notes.
Yeah, I was going to say in the show notes,
They'll be in the show
but I'm
notes.
not in charge of those, so
I
I'll
am.
let you do that. Leah's in charge, so that in that case, I can vouch for them; they'll be excellent. Yes, maybe direct people there to ways that they themselves can grow, and they might be able to encourage their music teams. Often, people serving in music teams, it could be a hard job, and so we want to encourage them and help them and equip them. Actually, often people would be so keen to have a bit of help, either someone else on a Sunday getting involved, or even just knowing where to look for good things to help them.
Wow, one absolutely massive vision of music Ben just gave us. If we thought that the songs we sing on a Sunday were just there to sort of like fill time, this like squashes any of that. It's truth which is going to shape us. It's truth which is we're going to feel like it's to God, it's to one another, it's to our own hearts, it's to the lost who might be in the building. That is just incredible.
Yeah, our goal is to behold Jesus. And that's just so much more than just coming along and having a little sing song. Like, there's something, God is at work when we sing, and the word of God is dwelling in us richly, which I must say, when I'm tired and I'm just singing songs I know really well and I can become quite stale, is quite humbling to remember. And it's, I must say, also slightly rebuking. You've got to come to a Sunday. Sorry, not a Sunday. The whole week. We just talked about
yes,
this.
the whole week.
I feel I should know this. I'm the one that's on the
We're
music
not just
team.
Sunday Christians here, Leah.
Yes, I'm so sorry. It's a completely different way of thinking about it, isn't it? And just knowing that, be expectant.
Yes, be expectant, because this matters. This has spiritual weight and significance. Be expectant. Boom.
Ben, we like to ask our guests one bonus question as a surprise. And for season 2, our question is, who has encouraged you most in your faith?
I think the all-encompassing category of the people who have shared their life as well as what they believe with me, which is a cheeky way of getting in about 5 or 6 people, but from parents to youth leaders to my wife to friends, dear friends like Leah. The thing that I've really appreciated from each of them is they point me to Jesus, but they do so in a real way where they share their life as well. And it's all done in the context of like real deep community.
Thank you so much to Ben Slee for being our guest on episode 6 of Delight Podcast. We can't wait to be with you again next week for episode 7 of Delight Podcast, when we will be exploring the topic of evangelism with the fabulous Kaz Dodds. Do join us. This is Adam and Leah, delightfully signing off. Bye-bye.
Bye.